Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff Mom Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio. And welcome back to SMNTY Fiction. It's been a while.
It's been a while.
We took a little hiatus, but we are back. This is a once a month thing, generally, that we do. It's ongoing. Right now, we're in the middle. We're in the third part of a trilogy, and we're in the final stretch. We are in the final stretch, everyone. Christina puts extra work into these and makes them amazing. So, as always, shout out to her. But also understand if this isn't your thing. Also, apologies because it has been a minute, and I would suggest going back to listen to the last episode, but I'm going to try to give you a really good recap. So, content warning. Mentioned child endangerment, disease, end of the world type stuff. There's nothing too intense in this chapter. But just to say, that will be there. Also, disclaimer, I didn't know I was going to have to put into anything I've ever written. I have driven motorcycles before, but it's been a long time. So forgive me if I got some things wrong.
That was very specific and funny.
Yeah, I was reading it. I was like, oh, I don't know. Maybe that's right. I can't remember. But when I wrote it, I had ridden a motorcycle much more recently. So anyway, I also know it's not as easy as described, so please don't yell at me.
If Bella can do it, so can I.
You know, I've been thinking we haven't finished our Twilight. We got to wrap it up.
We have to.
Also, I wrote this during NaNoWriMo, which is no longer a thing, and some of you have written in about it. It dissolved and sounds like it was a long time coming.
Sad.
People are trying to start up more local versions of it, so check into that if you're interested. But basically, that for those who don't know, you would write a novel during the month of November. It didn't have to be great. And this is one of the things I wrote during that. And I've only very lightly edited it because I wanted to see what I was going through, what I was thinking during it. But all right, here's the recap. It has been a minute. So there is a disease called HSV5 that has pretty much decimated the human population. Basically, it makes it hard for people to get pregnant. It's a sort of one and done situation. So the government, which is called the state in here, has set up these conception centers, which are the only legal place to try to have a baby. They work alongside the religious entity ARM, and if a baby is born, they decide where the baby goes. Our protagonist, Tilda, decides to run off with her child, Madison, who was produced illegally. For 7 years, they evaded the enforcers searching for them, eventually encountering a resistance and learning that ARM was responsible for HSV5 and that there had been a vaccine, but they destroyed all but one. Tilda and Madison go to the heart of the enemy in Washington, D.C. to try to retrieve it, and it turns out that the founders of ARM are Madison's paternal grandparents, and they've been saving the vaccine for him. He gets it, but then a skirmish ensues, and Tilda is able to broadcast the truth over the broadcast system and escapes. They are then pursued not only by the state and the resistance, who wants Madison to make a cure, but also new enemies who seek to harm them. Madison struggles with guilt over the vaccine. The pair are attacked by a militaristic group that severely injures Tilda and kidnaps Madison. And now she's desperately trying to heal and come up with a plan and find and rescue him. But it's looking pretty hopeless. She doesn't know where they are. She's still wounded. She took shelter in a church. And then she was interrupted by someone. And that's where we left off. So let us get into the fiction. Gasping, Tilda spun around so rapidly she teetered on the edge of losing her balance, reaching for the gun in her waistband but missing widely as her pack got caught on the door with a thud. And she was going to infiltrate a military base. It's all right. Tilda's eyes darted around wildly until they landed on the source of the voice, a man rising from a seat at one of the pews situated from the pulpit, his hands outstretched to indicate that he meant no harm. I'm not going to hurt you, he assured her as she fumbled behind her for a weapon, gulping great, painful gasps of air. Do you remember me? Tilda shook her head, cursing herself for not checking the room when she'd entered like she normally would. She hadn't heard anyone come in. Because you were too busy crying, she thought angrily. Her fingers closed around the handgun, and she tugged it free, bringing it around to point it at the man, her hand shaking so badly she could barely aim. The man's eyes lowered to the gun and then rose back up to her face. Okay, you're armed. I'm not. Can we just talk for a second? Tilda said nothing, concentrating on slowing her breathing and keeping the gun steady, thinking despairingly of the car that was getting further and further away, the brief respite from hopelessness reciprocally diminishing. She could just shoot him, she thought, and then almost instantly recoiled. As if he could see the callous laziness of her thought, Tilda imagined she could see fleeting disappointment on the man's face, but it quickly passed. Or it may have been her projecting. My name's Merlin, from the Resistance. We met. He stopped when recognition dawned on Tilda's face, his shoulders relaxing noticeably. I remember you, she whispered hoarsely, her declaration laced with the muted shock of returning memories, forgotten about and recalled with dull surprise that you had forgotten them in the first place. We met before. Though she'd not composed a sentence but a jumbled mishmash of words, Merlin nodded encouragingly. Yes, the last time I saw you was in Chicago right before... He broke off, licking his lips. Before the bomb went off, Tilda supplied for him mentally, and it hung unsaid in space between them. She wondered how many people the Resistance had lost that day, how many friends of Merlin's had died. With some shame, she realized she hadn't spared them a second thought. Tilda's mouth opened to apologize, but she closed it, thinking that it would do no good. Merlin seemed to understand anyway. We thought you had died, he told her, and Tilda furrowed her brow. When we heard your voice over the broadcast system... He shook his head with wonderment. Some people were angry. His voice faded to a droning background sound. Suddenly, Tilda became aware of the gun in her hand and almost dropped it as though it was hot. That was the first time she'd shot someone, most likely killed him. Chicago. An embarrassed flush rose to her cheeks and she tightened her grip around the handle, her aim now unwavering. Merlin's face fell. I'm not here to hurt you, he reiterated softly. Then what are you here for? Tilda demanded, doing her best to assert some authority into her tone. Merlin observed her with bright brown eyes for a moment. Will you sit? He requested simply, gesturing to the pews. Tilda shook her head, breathing through her nose, her mind racing with the implications of his presence. The Resistance could come barging in at any moment, or they could be outside waiting for her. I understand, he said, not without some sadness. But I'm going to sit at least. And he did, perching on the edge of the pew and pivoting his body to face her. We heard about Madison, he started, and though this was said gently, Tilda experienced this as a punch to the gut, her heart plummeting into her stomach. The gun twitched in her hand, her shoulders and wrist aching from holding it upright, but she did not lower it. How? She forced out. Merlin ran a hand through his hair, stopping when Tilda jerked at the motion. The people who took him, and who I'm presuming did that to you, he gestured with his chin at her face and bloody clothes, contacted us about collecting the reward. Only they want much, much more than we can give. Tilda swallowed, taking in his every movement and facial tic, trying to derive any information about Madison from him. The fact that we're so desperate to get him back piqued their interest. They know that they have us exactly where they want us, but they also know there must be something about him, something that makes him unique. He released a heavy breath and looked up at her. She took a reflexive step back, her pack brushing against the door. It doesn't take a genius to guess that he might be immune to HSV-5, what with your broadcast about the existence of a vaccine and the Resistance's desperation to find you. As if a frost was slowly making its way through her body, Tilda went unnervingly still, hardly breathing. "Who are they?" she managed in a whisper. "They're a faction of survivors that have been trying to form their own society separate from the conception centers. They have a complex just west of Christiansburg. They're heavily armed and, well..." He broke off and then continued delicately. "They're viewed as quite radical and dangerous. They take members both willing and not." Tilda's knees trembled with weakness. The gun lowered fractionally as her tired brain rushed to process this. "If they know, or they think Madison is immune," she began, horror nipping at her heels. "They won't exchange him, no matter what we offer," Merlin said with brutal simplicity. "They'll try to find a way to synthesize the vaccine from his blood, and if they can't, they won't stop trying. They'll never let him go. They'd rather the world die than give him to another organization, effectively giving up their power to whoever they gave him to." "He's not..." Tilda started, her voice cracking. "He's not something to be used or given." She tried again. "He's a child. He's my child." Merlin watched her with sympathetic eyes. "I know." Tears pricked at her eyes, but she blinked them back. "You can take comfort in the fact that they'll want to keep him in the very best condition possible, at least. They won't hurt him." The way he said it was very aware that the words offered very little in the way of comfort, and Tilda derived no reassurance from them. An image of her child alone and scared in sterile white rooms rose to the forefront of her mind and refused to be uprooted or ignored. "That still doesn't fully answer my question," she pointed out. "What is the Resistance doing here?" "We're here to confront them and take Madison back," he told her. "This is our last stop before we move in. The higher-ups are coordinating our plan of attack. Some of our members have been sent ahead to scout their location, the level of security. I'm on recon. Officially, I'm out looking for supplies." Tilda noted his use of the word officially. She didn't have to ask the question for him to answer, "But I've been looking for you." Tilda swallowed, glancing down at the gun in her hands, now aimed somewhere at the floor. She didn't have it in her heart to raise it again. "Why?" "Of course we've been looking for you, for both of you. But when the people who took Madison contacted us, we asked about you. They told us they left your body on the side of the road somewhere," he told her bluntly. "That they weren't sure if you were alive or dead." And another thought came to her then, demanding her immediate and complete attention. What if Madison thought she was dead? "We knew where you were coming from thanks to your transmission and the general proximity of where Madison must have been taken in order for the radicals to have taken him, so we mapped out a few possible routes that you may have taken, narrowing it down to a handful of options. We sent out caravans, searching for any sign of your body. One of the groups ran into some folks on horseback and asked them if they'd seen you. They were reluctant at first, but when the situation was explained, one of them admitted that they had seen you, that you were heading west on horseback last they saw you. I'm told they were very worried about the two of you, by the way." Tilda dismissed this, a detached anger that the group she'd sheltered with had given up their location to the Resistance. For all they knew, it could have been anyone, including the radicals that now had her son or other groups like them. Merlin kept going. "Now, we knew which way you'd gone and by which road, so we called the other caravans in and launched a search and rescue of sorts. We found the carcass of a horse in the middle of the road. Yours?" After a moment, Tilda nodded numbly. We thought so. So we searched the hillside and found signs that indicated someone had fallen down the side and was injured. There was blood on the leaves at the bottom. Merlin's eyes roved over her as if searching for the injury that could have caused this. But no body, and tracks traveling up the hillside back up to the road that matched your profile. We knew you must still be alive and would be heading in the direction you'd seen them leave with Madison, presuming you'd been conscious when they left. With shame, Tilda recalled her internal debate over whether or not she should pursue Madison, that perhaps his capture was an out for her. In light of the Resistance's automatic assumption that she would go after her son, the shame was magnified even more. She hoped Merlin couldn't read it on her face. If he could, he gave no indication of it. Most of our party went forward, but one caravan stayed back, looking for any sign of you. We stopped, searched the small towns as thoroughly as possible on our tight schedule, but though there were a couple of things we thought might be a trace of you, we never found any concrete evidence. Since you were injured and on foot, I thought for sure we'd find you on that long stretch between Shawsville and here, but if you were there, we missed you. Tilda remembered the lights that had awoken her in the middle of the night. Merlin drew her attention back to him, red hues from the stained glass windows painted onto his face as the sun sunk lower into the sky. We were ordered to give up on the search effort to find you. Madison was our mission priority. If we happened to find you along the way, great. But I knew you must be here if you'd headed in this direction at all. There was no way you could have gotten much further than this on foot, especially if you were hurt. And with that intel, I knew you couldn't be sure of which way to proceed, that you'd hole up somewhere and make a plan. So, I put myself in your shoes. And first I went to the police station, he smiled. And lo and behold, the back door had recently been opened. A woman's shoe prints in the dust. But you weren't there. So I started walking, looking for a space nearby where you might stop. When I saw this church, he shrugged. I figured you'd be here. It's the last place I'd look normally, apart from school. But I thought, with Madison gone... He trailed off, leaving the impact of his absence on her left unsaid. A burning embarrassment took hold of her that she was apparently so predictable. If she had prided herself on one thing over the years, it was her ability to hide and remain undetected. Evidently, that pride was misplaced. No one knows I'm here. No one knows that you're here, or that I was still looking for you, he told her evenly. She tried to guess at the reason why he'd continue to search her out, even though he'd been ordered not to, and to do so without telling anyone, and could not tell anyone. Why? She asked again, tired. Why did you want to find me? Merlin watched her for a moment. It never sat well with me, how you were treated when you were at our base. After everything you'd been through, I've always been sort of inspired by you, I guess. Tilda wrinkled her face in confusion at this. You gave up everything for your son. You managed to evade the best of the best while on the run with the child. And you chose to risk losing him to get him a vaccine. And after all that, when I heard your voice on the broadcast, you sort of became someone a lot of us looked up to. The ones you hadn't pissed off by your refusal to return to the Resistance. He flashed her a wry smile. She did not have the willpower to return it. And then the radicals contacted us, told us you might be dead. I really, really didn't want that to be the case. It surprised me how much I didn't want it to be the case, he admitted with a tired chuckle. I guess I'd never seen a mother and child interact like the two of you before. It was so obvious that you loved each other, that you'd do anything to protect him. He shook his head, momentarily lost in his thoughts. Tilda didn't know how to handle this situation, more at a loss to his presence than when he had begun. When we found out you were alive, and that you were carrying on foot, injured to reunite with your son, I wanted to help that, I guess. I couldn't stop thinking about your kid alone with those people and you fighting against everything to get back to him. even though the odds were so heavily stacked against you. He favored her with an appraising look then, at her half-lowered handgun, the butt of the shotgun protruding from her pack. You must know that you have almost no chance. You know that, right? Anger came to Tilda's rescue, and she heard herself say through the roaring in her ears, I'm not stupid, but I will do whatever I have to. I know you will, he said quietly, his eyes coming to rest on the gun still in her hands. I want to help you, to give you a fighting chance. Tilda bit back a tide of questions she still had at this. She frankly could care less on the finer points of why he wanted to help her at this juncture. She just wanted Madison back. And how do you intend to do that? She asked, taking the tiniest of steps forward. Information, he responded readily. Like what? She pushed, taking another step closer. Like when the resistance is planning to attack, he offered. And your end goal is what exactly? A part of her was taken aback by the brazen nature of her question. For me and Madison to reunite and part ways from the resistance? Merlin hesitated. If that is your choice, he allowed, but I would try to persuade you to stay. The look on her face must have shown her opinion on that. He rushed to assert, Look, you have every right to be suspicious, and I honestly do believe that you'll come around on your own, if we give you space and time. Tilda very much disagreed with that notion, but the human race, while it now has a surplus of space, does not have much in the way of time, he said somberly. I didn't tell the others what I was doing, and I won't tell them that I spoke to you because I don't want to force you to do anything. And I'll grant you, they might not take your desire to part ways into consideration. Not until they've created a working vaccine from Madison's blood, at least. She found his honesty both refreshing and disheartening. I'm betting on you, he said simply, to do the right thing. Or as right as any avenue we have left to us in the shadow of what once was. He shrugged. And as is the nature of gambling, I might be wrong. But I do know above everything that you will do what you think is best for your son. So badly, Tilda wanted to believe him. You've got to trust someone sometime, right? He said, and Tilda responded before she'd really thought about it. You've been speaking to my mother. Merlin nodded. Homesickness, in an intense manner she hadn't experienced in a while, rose up inside her so powerful her throat momentarily closed off. I never asked for any of this, she heard herself murmur worlds away. Unflustered, Merlin replied, I know. None of us did. Tilda looked at the gun in her hands, numb. She almost admitted everything then, about how she felt unworthy, about the doubt that plagued her decision to take Madison and her ability to care for him. But the words lodged in her throat. Merlin kept going, oblivious to the turmoil begging to release inside her. We're moving in tonight if our scouts get back without intel influencing our plans otherwise. Like I said, just west of Christianburg, you can't miss it from what I understand. You're going to need to find a means of transport. It just so happens that I know where a working motorcycle is. He reached into his pockets and held up some keys for her inspection. You ever driven one before? Tilda shook her head and Merlin snorted. Yeah, me neither. But it should be simple enough, right? At the look on Tilda's face, he laughed. You'll figure it out, I'm sure. The plan as of now is to strike just before daybreak. Again, as long as we don't get any news of obstacles from the people we sent ahead. The radicals gave us a deadline. Right now, time is on our side, and hopefully we'll have the element of surprise. So you're suggesting I get there ahead of the resistance and use their attack as a distraction? Basically, Merlin concurred. And I see you have a few distractions of your own, he indicated her visible weapons. Tilda remembered her earlier breakdown about how useless they were in her hands, how powerless she was even when armed, and looked away. Tilda thought about this for a moment. They're these radicals, they're not going to leave Madison just because you're attacking the base. If anything, they'll use him as a shield. She managed to say this in a fairly matter-of-fact way, even though every cell in her body was screaming at the mere suggestion of it. Merlin inclined his head solemnly. Yes, but it's all I've got for you. It's a better shot than you going it alone. At least now you know what you're up against. And I can tell you, the plan is not to go in guns blazing. Infiltration, a simple in and out, would be ideal. You and I both know the odds of succeeding are slim. Yes, Tilda whispered, suddenly feeling quite faint. She swayed on her feet. Oh God, are you all right? Merlin exclaimed, half rising from his seat. I'm sorry, I should have asked earlier. I'm fine, she said, wincing at the raspiness in her own voice. You don't look fine, Merlin informed her seriously. The moment passed and Tilda straightened. I'm fine, she repeated firmly. Merlin did not look convinced. Maybe I should get you some help. No, Tilda denied immediately. Now where's this motorcycle? Merlin looked as if he wanted to argue, but at the muleless expression on Tilda's face, he backed down. Garage, he said shortly. 2 blocks west of the police station. Black, sleek-looking thing. I tested it up, revved up like a dream. And you just happened to pawn this? Tilda asked dubiously. Well, I was on a supply run, Merlin reminded her half-jokingly. He tossed her the keys. Tilda caught them and slid them into her pocket, not relishing the fact that he would know where she was going. It could be a trap. The doubt must have been obvious on her face because Merlin hastened to reassert, I'm not going to tell anyone. Hell, I won't even know myself if you take the damn thing. I'm just trying to do my part, I suppose. If you do escape with your kid, and the resistance doesn't discover a vaccine, that's on me, I suppose, for trusting you. Tilda's eyes strayed to the statue of the man behind Merlin hanging from the cross. I don't trust the resistance. I know. I already said I don't blame you. Madison wanted to go back, you know. She admitted without really planning to. If he could help with a cure, I told him it wasn't safe. I understand, Merlin assured her calmly. I don't know, she blurted out. What I'll do when I get him back, she corrected. I know that too. But I can tell you, as I'm sure you know, the resistance will not stop looking. You'd be safer from groups like these with us. Tilda did not respond. Merlin stood slowly, watching Tilda as one might watch a cornered animal liable to strike. I've said my piece. I know you have no reason to trust me, but I promise you, I have no intention of telling anyone I saw you. There's no one waiting for you outside, and there will be no one waiting for you at that garage. I just wanted to give you the tools to get your son back. Tilda wavered on the verge of thanking him, but refrained, still uncertain that this wasn't some elaborate trap. For an awkward moment, they watched each other. I still don't understand, Tilda confessed helplessly. Why help me? Because I have to believe there's still some good in this world, Merlin said flatly. Or else what's the point in saving it? He took a couple of steps forward. Will you let me leave? He gestured to her gun. After a moment, Tilda retreated from the door, allowing him passage. Merlin proceeded forward slowly, clearly doing his best not to spook her, but he paused with his hand on the door. Tilda's grip tightened instinctively on the gun, though she did not raise it. I hope to see you again someday, he said quietly, not quite looking at her, and that whatever you choose to do, you and your son are safe. And then he pushed out the door. It swung shut with a soft clack behind him, and Tilda stood immobilized, her ears almost painfully tense, listening for any sound outside of betrayal, but there was none. She retraced her steps back down the hall and took the side door out, adrenaline drowning out the pain of her injuries as she darted behind the church and under an opening in the fence. Not stopping, she crossed one street and then another, laser-focused on getting out of this place as soon as possible. Even if Merlin was telling the truth, there was still the possibility he'd been caught out, or he'd changed his mind. Someone else might spot her. She wanted to put as much distance as possible between her and them as quickly as possible. She looked to her left and right for this garage once she'd gone 2 blocks and spotted a sign with a zooming black car on it that read Shiny's Garage and Auto Parts, and she jogged toward it, the shotgun bouncing heavily against her lower back and almost surely leaving a bruise. Tilda stayed alert as she ran towards it, looking for any sign of betrayal. She turned into the parking lot, her eyes roving over cars and mopeds, but not locating any sleek black motorcycle. Looking behind her, she ventured toward a set of metal garage doors, grasping the handle of the closest one and hoisting it up. Inside was a cement room outfitted with tool shelves and workspaces, and in the center was a black, shining motorcycle. Tilda glanced over her shoulder once again before slipping the door closed behind her, leaving a little bit of space at the bottom open to hopefully expedite her getaway should she need to make one. Like it was a beast that needed to be wrangled, she approached the bike, doing her best to control the reflexive panic she got at the thought of operating it. She fished the keys Merlin had given her out of her pocket, briefly wondering how in the world it could have been she made such an impression on him. They'd only seen each other a handful of times and had only spoken once. With a pang, she realized that he'd seen her mother spoken to her more recently than Tilda herself had, and at length enough for her mother to espouse one of her many words of wisdom. You've got to trust someone sometime. Tilda ran her hands along the motorcycle's handles, its switches. She crouched to take in the pedals. Simple enough, she told herself bracingly. A glance outside the garage windows confirmed that she had very little light left. There were both pros and cons to leaving before the sun had set. She decided without giving it too much thought that it was best to leave sooner rather than later, even if that did leave her more exposed. There wasn't much time before the light was gone anyhow. After familiarizing herself with the bike, clumsily adjusting the seat, and giving herself a brief overview of how she supposed it worked, she consulted her map, hazarding a general guess to her location and determining her general path out of White Pine. Tilda took a deep breath, eyeing the machine. She tested to make sure the key fit in the lock, something she should have done first, but was a forgivable oversight because it slid home. Fatalistically, Tilda pulled open the garage door and quickly returned to the bike, snapping up the kickstand with her shoe and balancing on it as though it were a living thing. Girding herself, Tilda cranked the key, wincing as the engine at first sputtered loudly before roaring to life with painful volume. Experimentally, Tilda pressed down on what her experience on a bike led her to believe would be the brakes, and sure enough, the engine quieted. With something like a resigned, devil-may-care attitude, Tilda lifted her feet off the ground and placed them on the pedals, her balance wavering dangerously, and she pressed down gently on what she presumed to be the gas. Sure enough, the bike shot forward, and Tilda had to swerve to avoid a car, almost careening into another car in the process. Instinct guided her and she righted herself, navigating out of the parking lot in stops and starts and a much confused path. She took a right on the road, heeding that her hearing was impaired due to the low rumble of the engine. At the intersection, she stopped at the stop sign, looking both ways before she nearly laughed aloud. There was no one else on the road anymore obeying stop signs. She flew past the next few intersections without stopping, gradually piling more and more pressure to the acceleration, her hair whipping behind her. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Terminus Part 3, which is called Finite. I love a good title. I have all these titles. We're getting close to the end. And I think it's got it's building up. It's building up to something.
Got a boom.
Yeah. I do have to say, I'm not going to go into it in depth, But I've mentioned before, a lot of times when I go back over these, I'm like, oh, I know exactly where I was in this point of my life, at this point in my life. So I have ridden motorcycles before. I owned one in China. And the first time I rode it, I did it very recklessly and I crashed immediately. And I have a scar from it. I was fine. It was okay. But just to reiterate, I do know it doesn't work like this. Yeah, that was my bad. But I did have somebody coaxing me on. He was like, you can do it. Just do this. And I was like, okay. And no, absolutely no. The motorcycle is also a reference to Silent Hill, which is one of my favorite franchises. There is a whole thing in the first game where you don't have to, but if you know what you're doing, if you can find a motorcycle, and it changes the ending of the game. So that was a reference as well. I know I mentioned it before, but Merlin, the character Merlin, is based on someone I met in Australia who was very tech savvy. And his name was Merlin. I was like, that's the coolest thing. But it was going back over this, and their conversation was very fascinating to me, because he's kind of basically like, I'm betting on you. And I hope that you do what I think is the right thing. But I'm going to give you these tools, and I hope that you can save your son. So we shall see. It is to be continued. We could have 2 chapters left.
Ooh,
that's coming.
Damn.
Yeah. And then we'll move into something else. Yes. But I really hope that people are still interested. I have loved hearing from people who are and write in. So please keep that coming. You can email us at hello@stuffmomnevertoldyou.com. You can find us on Blue Sky at Momstar Podcast, or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff Mom Never Told You. We're also on YouTube, and we have a book you can get wherever you get your books. Thanks, as always, to our super producer, Christina, our executive producer, Maya, and our contributor, Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.